Hello and Happy New Year. I'm Tim Ayres of LePage Coast Capital Realty, serving Sooke and Greater Victoria, BC. Today, I'm here to talk a little bit about what your BC assessment value is, and perhaps more importantly, what it isn't. By now, you've probably received your assessment notice in the mail. If not, you can view your assessment online at bcassessment.ca. You should probably do that anyway because there's some useful tools there to help you assess whether or not your assessment is realistic, or if you should dispute it. More on that later. In general, you'll find that your assessment probably increased from 2018. In Greater Victoria, assessments ranged from a low of an increase of 4% in parts of Saanich to a high of 13% in Sydney. Sooke's average assessment value increased by about 10%. Some parts of Vancouver Island saw assessed values jump as much as 20%. So what does it all mean, and how does it actually relate to actual market value and property prices in 2019? One of the trends we're going to see when we look at assessed value versus market value this year is that any valuation of a property at any time is a snapshot in time and not necessarily valid after that time has passed. So BC Assessment's goal is to give you a value of your property as of July 1st of the previous year. So by the time you get your assessment in January of 2019, 6 months have passed since that value was determined, and it's probably no longer accurate. In the last few years of rapidly rising property values, you could expect to see listing prices in the following year much higher than assessed value in some cases. In 2018, we saw a noticeable slowdown in the later half of the year. So with assessed values being done as of July 1st, I would expect this year we're going to see list prices to be a lot closer to assessed value or perhaps even under assessed value. But to be fair, this can happen in any market, whether it's really busy or a little slower. One of the biggest myths I see, and one of the most persistent myths I see going around each year, is that if your assessment increases or decreases by a certain amount, you can expect your property taxes to increase or decrease by a similar amount. This is simply not true. BC Assessments is tasked with valuing all the properties in British Columbia in a given municipality to create what's called the assessment roll, which is a total value of all property in a region or municipality. The assessment roll is then used by the local government to assess taxes. That part is true. However, your assessed value increase or decrease often has very little to do with the amount of property tax you'll actually pay. Every year, the municipality determines how much money it's going to need and will pass a budget. And they'll take that budget number, divide it by the assessment roll to determine what's called the mill rate. And the mill rate is the tax rate per $1,000 of assessed value. So to determine your individual tax bill, you take the assessed value, divide it by 1,000, and then multiply it by the mill rate. So if your assessment went up by 10%, but so did the rest of the houses in your area, then your taxes payable should be about the same as they were if everything else was held equal. Of course, we all know that costs increase every year for the municipality, so you would typically expect to see an increase anyway, but you won't be paying any more than your fair share is what I'm trying to say. However, if your assessed value went up by, say, 15% and everybody else only went up by 7 or 8%, then yes, you could expect your taxes to increase more than normal. But the question you have to ask is, why has your assessment value gone up higher than the rest of the houses in the neighborhood? If it's justifiable, maybe you've done a lot of renovations, taken out some building permits, done an addition, that kind of thing, there's not much you can do if it reflects the actual reality. However, if you think that your BC assessment value has unfairly been increased, then you can file a dispute, which must be done by the end of January. I'll give you an example. One time I actually successfully argued my assessed value on my house because BC assessment valued it at $50,000 more than what I paid for the property. So I had a clear case, I supported it with evidence, and was successful in getting them to reduce my assessed value. So you should check out bcassessment.ca. There's a wealth of information and tools about your property, how BC Assessment values properties, and how to dispute your assessment if possible or if necessary. And of course, if you are curious about the current market value of your property or you're considering a move in 2019, don't hesitate to get in touch for a casual, easy conversation about your home and the current housing market. I wish you all the best for a successful 2019, and thanks so much for watching this video.